You might have seen this video going viral in the social media. A giant rocket being caught in the middle of the air. So cool, right? But why is SpaceX trying to catch a rocket in the middle of the air instead of landing in a drone ship or the landing site, just like Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy? Is there any significant reason behind it? Let's find out in this video. If you are new here, I'm Yashwant, an average Indian guy who is enthusiastic about space and rockets, just like you. So imagine you have a friend who is Surya, who is living in London next to the apartment of Virat Kohli. And on his birthday, you plan to visit London to meet your friend. How would you travel? Through airplane, right? You get into a plane and fly to London. You take taxi to travel from airport to your friend's house. The aeroplane can be refueled and used again. The taxi can be driven multiple times. And the two-wheeler that I have taken through EMI can be driven multiple times.
I got you, fam!
But it's not same in the commercial rockets. For example, SLS, Saturn V, GSLV and my favorite PSLV cannot be used multiple times. You ignite, it's done. You have to build a new one for the next launch. But here comes the hero of the story. In 2013, SpaceX announces that they are going to land their Falcon 9 back on Earth. In addition to the complexity of this idea, they were going to try to land on a floating drone ship. Something like this had never happened before at that time. It seemed like an impossible goal. But if this was successful, it would be a giant step towards rocket reusability. So SpaceX began experimenting with their various test vehicles to learn how to land a rocket. After a couple of years and many explosions, SpaceX finally made the impossible possible. The iconic sight of Falcon 9 landing has become a routine nowadays. SpaceX has perfected this incredible feat of engineering and saved them a lot of money. Each time a Falcon 9 is reflown, it saves the cost of building a brand new booster. To this day, SpaceX is the only company that has landed and reused their orbital rocket booster. But now they are focusing their efforts towards Starship, the next evolution of crazy space idea. Those who have been followed Starship program have been treated to some incredible spectacles. The recent Starship Flight Test 5 is the most craziest thing SpaceX have ever done. And it shows that ambitious plans for Starship are more realistic than most of us thought. After all of crazy things SpaceX have ever done till now, it seemed things like this couldn't get any crazier until this. Before this, Starship was planned to land as same as Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy. But there was a problem. Instead, they decided to catch it out of the air as it makes its final approach towards the launch mount.
It's an entirely different kind of flying, altogether.
It's an entirely different kind of flying.
Although it sounded like another crazy Elon idea. SpaceX aren't the only company to consider catching rockets out of the air. Rocket Lab is planning to catch its Electron rocket using a parachute and a helicopter. And guess what? Back in 60s, NASA considered catching the enormous Saturn V first stage using a giant helicopter with rotator blades around 100 meters long. In comparison, SpaceX idea sounds a little less crazier. And we have all seen SpaceX have successfully caught super heavy. See, space travel is expensive. In order to make it a little less expensive, we have to make it reusable. In order to know why to catch it, we need to understand the overall goal of Starship. Starship consists of two stages. The booster is called super heavy and the second stage is just called Starship. Super Heavy lifts the second stage out of the thickest part of the atmosphere, and Starship does the rest of the work. After separating, Super Heavy comes down to be caught by a giant tower. Trust me guys, this is the best hug that I've ever seen. For Starship, the aim is to travel to Moon and Mars. In order to achieve this, SpaceX will use a fleet of starships to refuel in space. On top of this, SpaceX also wants to use Starship for Earth-to-Earth travel, which means to travel opposite side of the globe, it takes many hours, which can be reduced to minutes by this. This means Starship need to perform multiple flights a day, with a turnaround time on par with airlines. As I said, original plan of Super Heavy was to land directly onto the launch mount, making it instantly ready for the next flight. Although this would have many benefits, it would require a level of precision much higher than SpaceX have shown in their Falcon 9 land. So SpaceX moved to their idea of landing Super Heavy on a landing pad and using a giant crane to lift it onto the launch mount. This would require at least 6 extremely large landing legs with enough shock absorption to handle the landing. But this is where problems comes in. For Falcon 9 landing, booster need to be transported to refurbishment hangar where many components were replaced and inspected. One of the most critical part in the refurbishment process is the landing legs. All of this takes an enormous amount of time, which isn't an option for Super Heavy. Removing the legs completely from the design would not only simplify the turnaround time, but it would also save incredible amount of weight. Every kilogram of mass saved will allow the rocket to carry heavier payloads into the orbit. Removing the legs completely from the design would reduce the mass of the entire booster up to 10%. But without any legs, SpaceX's only option left is to catch the booster. This will still require a great amount of precision. The booster will need to hit its mark almost perfectly. One of the big advantages of Super Heavy as our Falcon 9 is its ability to hover. Even with one engine firing, Falcon 9 is too powerful to hover, so it has to perform a suicidal burn. This involves firing the engine just at the right time, bringing the vertical velocity to zero the moment it touches the ground. Since Super Heavy has more engines than Falcon 9, it helps Super Heavy to hover around the pad and give it extra time to adjust its course. SpaceX will catch the booster on its final approach using a giant arm attached to the launch tower, which is named Mechazilla. On Falcon 9, landing legs consist of telescopic tubes which are filled with compressed helium. As legs fold in on themselves, the compressed gas acts as shock absorber. The main thing here is the shock absorber. Shock absorber will be built into the tower, not the ship. This will reduce the amount of stress to the rocket. Taking all of this away from a rocket and transferring into a landing arm will allow Super Heavy to be as light as possible without putting much stress on the rocket. But saving weight isn't the only part of the puzzle. Real benefit here is the ability to rapidly relaunch the booster. If it can be immediately lowered onto the launch mount after a landing, the booster can be serviced, detanked, and inspected for its next flight. After all, the detanking process is especially important for the Starship since it contains excess of methane after its landing. As methane isn't allowed to be vented into the atmosphere, so SpaceX planned to pump the leftover methane back into the tank for it to be recondensed and use it for the next flight. It's inspiring to see them taking incredible engineering challenges which has advanced the world of spaceflight massively. It's clear we have witnessed the history being made. If you are into space, welcome to the channel.